Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got kind of a crazy story here sent to me by Madcap, Caleb, and Lee. Ambulance hits Oregon cyclist, rushes him to the hospital, then sticks him with an $1,800 bill, according to a lawsuit. Oregon Live published this story by Amy Green. Talk about drumming up business. An Oregon cyclist who was struck by an ambulance that made a right turn into him has filed a lawsuit against the ambulance provider after it scooped him up, drove him to the hospital, and then billed him for the service, which of course was only necessary because they had already hit him. See, it's strange, but sad because the man broke his nose, he got scraped up and other injuries. His attorney says the ambulance provider sent his client a $1,862 bill for the ambulance ride, which was necessary after the ambulance hit him. He's 71 years old. That $1,800 bill is among $47,000 in medical expenses that the man's racked up so far, and he's expecting to rack up $50,000 more. Now, the ambulance company has not responded to a request for comment from the news agency, and neither did an insurance company that covers vehicles that's involved in the lawsuit. The suit claims that the victim's uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage is obligated to cover any damages that the ambulance company doesn't cover. So according to the lawsuit, the man was pedaling through the small town of Rainier in Columbia County in October of 2022 when he and the ambulance were traveling in the same direction on a street that is a mix of homes and businesses. The ambulance then made a right turn onto another street, crashing into this man, destroying his bicycle in the process. The crash happened in front of the ambulance's station, and the ambulance was simply returning from a trip. So the ambulance is coming back, heading back to its station, and as they make the right turn on the street, they hit the bicyclist. That's the allegation. According to police reports, a driver who struck this man and a passenger in the ambulance estimated the ambulance was only doing between 2 miles and 10 miles per hour when they heard a thump. They heard a thump. They stopped and saw the injured man. Now, the man estimated to police that he was going 5 to 10 miles per hour and said he didn't think the ambulance was going to turn in front of him. His bicycle was crushed under the ambulance wheel. So neither of them are moving all that fast, but they're moving in the same direction. And there are rules of the road with respect to who's got the right of way. And generally speaking, bicyclists are allowed, as long as they stay to the far right, they're allowed to be on the road. And it's up to people in automobiles to be aware of what's around them and not turn into things that are in their way. The man's lawsuit also seeks money for pain and suffering. He says he suffered decreased range of motion, reduced grip strength, and other symptoms. Ambulance crashes involving cars, cyclists, or pedestrians are rare, but not unheard of in Oregon. Last month, the estate of a 25-year-old filed a $6 million lawsuit against another ambulance company, stating that one of their ambulances made a left turn in front of this man's car on US 101, killing him. So, also, in July, at 1 a.m., Oregon State Police say another ambulance hit a car with a flat tire parked to the side of I-84 in Hood River County, killing a 55-year-old woman who was standing outside her car. Now, no lawsuit's been filed in that case yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if one's coming. But this just gets you back to the most simple concept, and that is that you own an ambulance company. You are an ambulance, figuratively speaking, for legal purposes. And you hit somebody. You pick them up and put them in your ambulance, take them to the hospital because they need to go to the hospital. They needed an ambulance. Well, they needed one because of you. And so if this was allowed, if this kind of thing, and again, we don't know if these facts are exactly as portrayed in the lawsuit, because the ambulance company might come along and say, none of this is true, we don't know what they're talking about, it never happened, who knows? There's a police report that indicates that something happened, right? But the point is that if you cause harm to somebody, or you put them in a situation that forces them to expend money or something, you can't say, okay, I forced you to do this, now pay me money. That's not how it works. Now, it is true that ambulances do fall into a slightly different category of business than a typical car for hire, right? Think of a taxi or an Uber. Generally speaking, if I'm standing by the side of the road and I flag down a taxi, I can ask the taxi driver, can you take me over here, with the understanding they're going to charge me. When I get to the end of that ride, I got to pay them. But we also had an agreement at the beginning when I climbed in that I would, in fact, pay them if they took me someplace. That's basic contract law. However, the law has evolved to accept the concept that there are situations where some people cannot enter into a contract because of the medical condition they're in. So let's suppose that there's a horrific car accident, there's all kinds of injured people, and someone calls the police call an ambulance shows up. They don't have to walk up to somebody and say, excuse me, would you like to go to the hospital? Especially if they're unconscious. So I've had people ask me, go, Steve, that's an interesting situation there. How can I enter into a contract when in fact I'm unconscious? Why can't I get to the hospital and when I wake up go, I refuse to go to the hospital in an ambulance? Well, as a matter of law and as a matter of public policy, the courts have literally for hundreds of years recognized the idea that it's better to say, we'll assume the injured person would want to go to the hospital if they're conscious. So we'll do that for them instead of letting people by the side of the road have even worse things happen to them while we wait for them to come to. Okay? Makes complete sense. However, when you're riding along on your bicycle and someone runs you over and then takes you to the hospital and then they bill you for the ride, you've got to look at that and go, what? You can't be serious because you're the one who put me in the situation where I needed the ride. So this is one where I don't know about the full amount of money the guy wants because apparently I saw a number in here that he's seeking close to $1 million if you add up everything, medical bills, pain and suffering, all this stuff. Close to $1 million. I have no idea if this guy's injuries are anywhere near $1 million. I have no idea. But I'm simply talking about the legal concept of somebody who puts you in harm's way and then charges you to take you out of harm's way. And that would be a problem. And that would also be contrary to public policy. So getting back to the idea that the courts are going to say, hey, look, you were unconscious. And professionals, trained professionals looked at you and said, this person needs to go to the hospital. And they took you to the hospital because it was in your own best interest, and we as a society have recognized that that's an important thing to do. The exact same public policy rationale would also cover the opposite of that, where they do it to you and then go, we're going to take you to the hospital and charge you for it. No. Now, don't get me wrong. Them taking him to the hospital, I can see that as being, okay, do that. You're there. He needs to go to the hospital. But to bill him for the ride is insanity. It is. And so I don't know if that portion of this will ever be litigated by itself. Chances are this case is going to settle, and the settlement will be confidential, and we won't hear anything about it other than the case has been dismissed and the parties have agreed to a settlement. Happens all the time. But I, as a mental exercise, and I suspect some of you too, would love to see that issue litigated. Can I, if I run an ambulance, can I run you over, put you in my ambulance, take you to the hospital, and then bill you for the ride? And I would suspect the answer to that is no. If I was the judge, it would be no. And that's the real interesting angle here. So the man got hit by an ambulance. And as they point out, it happens from time to time. But they rushed him to the hospital and then stuck him with an $1,800 bill. And that again, in the grand scheme of things, he's seeking almost $1 million in damages. That's not exactly the biggest portion of this claim. But in my mind, it's the most interesting. So there you go, from Amy Green at the Oregonian. Madcap, Caleb, and Lee all sent that. Thank you very much. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I work to buy a car to go to work.